It's time for the Hockey Writers Grindline, a weekly show covering everything Detroit Red Wings. Brought to you by our own iconic top line of Wings writers. Sit back and enjoy The Grind.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back into another episode of The Grind Line here at the Hockey Writers. I'm your host, Matthew Zator. As always, joined in by my defense partner, Devin Little. We also got one of our forwards back here, and Tony Wolak. Tony, welcome back to the show. First of all, how's it going?
It's going well. Thanks for letting me join this week. I know I've been MIA for a little bit here, but it's for, I'll save it for the one good, one bad. So.
All right, sounds good. And Devin, how's it going this week?
It's going good. We have something like legitimate to talk about this week, so that's exciting. I can't wait to dive in.
Yeah, well, let's do it. Let's before we get to the big news, or one of them, it's the biggest news we've had in a while. But before we get to that, let's get to our one good, one bad. And since you already alluded to it, Tony, let's go with you first. What's a one good, one bad from this past week?
I've been MIA for a little bit because there's a lot of preparations to be done, but my son turned 1, so we had an awesome luau birthday party for him. So it was like a couple of weeks of like getting set up, getting invites out, all that. It was a blast. We loved it. He loved it. He had a great time. Looked real gnarly in his Hawaiian shirt onesie. So it was great. The bad, I guess, is completely unrelated to that, but just hockey season's still at least another month away, so it can't come quick enough, you know.
Yes, and we've had that as our bad, I think, the last 3 weeks.
I mean, it's true.
It's very true. All right, Devin, over to you. What's one good, one bad from this past week?
There is not a single hockey fan that would disagree. My one good is going to be Derek Lalonde and his sons visiting the Lions training camp. Good to see the Lions accepting Buffalo Bill fans as part of the crowd. That's fun. That's exciting. Also love, just like we said with Seider and Raymond last week, it's good to see the other Detroit teams kind of mingle with each other. So we love that. And then my one bad, I want to say something different, but I'm not sure if there is anything different. You know what? My one bad is that Gustav Lindstrom is not a Detroit Red Wing anymore. Maybe that's not like a really big bad, but that means that the Red Wings only have one player left from their 2017 draft. That's Michael Rasmussen. And it's safe to say that draft did not necessarily go the way that Detroit hoped back in 2017. So that'll be my one good, one bad for the week.
Yeah, I do agree with that. That draft wasn't the best for the Red Wings, that's for sure, especially compared to what we've gotten in the last few. So for sure. All right, my good is there was news. We had something we could actually talk about this week that's new from our other series we've been doing, which is fun, but it's great to have some new stuff to talk about. So that's a good for me. A bad, and I'll just keep echoing this. Hockey's not here yet. We need to get hockey back on TV. I'm really getting antsy. I'm writing all these preview pieces, and it's just I want to see it happen, not just talking about it. So hockey season can't come soon enough, or just preseason. I'll just ask for that. I mean, Traverse City, let's do it. That's still ways off, but it was announced when it was going to be. So we have a date to look forward to. So that's also a good for sure for me as well. All right, we've talked about it. Let's dive in and talk about the news that happened this week. And that was the Red Wings acquiring Jeff Petry for the Montreal Canadiens for the aforementioned Gustav Lindstrom and a conditional fourth round pick in the 2025 draft. So conditions, we'll find out what all that kind of entails. But biggest acquisition was Jeff Petry. So start with you, Tony, since you've been off for a while. What do you think about this trade, getting Petry to kind of round out the defense, really? I mean, now we'll talk about it, who could be out now that he's been added to the lineup. But what do you think about the acquisition of Petry?
Kind of interesting though. You don't often see trades take place in August here. Obviously, there's the Erik Karlsson trade that preempted this, and then Petry was moved to the Canadiens, and then from there traded to the Red Wings. I guess my my belief on what happened was I think Steve Yzerman was perfectly content with the 7 defensemen, including Lindstrom, he had heading into training camp. You had Wallman and Seider on the top pair, and then some combination of Olli Maatta, Ben Sherrod, Justin Holl, and Shane Gostisbehere rounding out the second and third pairs. But when Jeff Petry became available and then made it known that Detroit was his top destination, yeah, sure, why not? You're paying pennies on the dollar for a quality defenseman, despite being in his mid and going to be late 30s pretty soon here. But why not? It's a great acquisition, and it makes the Red Wings defense that much more competitive. As far as what he brings to the Red Wings and what to expect, one thing I was kind of curious about was when Jeff Petry was originally in Montreal before he went to Pittsburgh and then got traded back. How did he play with Ben Sherratt? Because him and Sherratt were teammates there for 3 years. And at 5-on-5, they actually had some decent numbers. 53% shot attempt share, expected goals for percentage was 52.5%, and then scoring chances for was almost 55%. And this is cumulative across the 3 seasons. Penalty kill together, not great whatsoever, but 5-on-5, they were pretty good. So, I mean, sure, it's been a couple of years since then. It may not be the same sort of chemistry there anymore, but at least there's familiarity. And as far as like how the defense is going to shape up during the season, if the Red Wings employ some sort of rotation with defensemen and throw in some games where they play 11 forwards and 7 defensemen, apart from Seider and Wallman, you're looking at about 64 to 68 games per defenseman. And for players like Petry, Sherrod, those guys who are in their 30s, and then the others who are getting close or in their early 30s, 64 to 68 games is enough. It's plenty for them, fact with the other games being, I guess, reserved for injury or being a healthy scratch. So everyone's getting playing time. There's flexibility up and down the lineup. I think it's great. They haven't had this much depth on defensemen in years, and it's also nice, of course, to see the hometown kid coming back. So all in all, I like it. It's not a huge needle mover, but it's a good deal.
I agree. It adds a lot of depth, veteran depth, and Petry can still play the game. I mean, yes, it's been, like you said, it's been a while since he was in his peak. Like, he had those 4 straight seasons with 40+ points, and one of the top defensemen on the Canadiens, and very durable, had a bunch of 82 game seasons there, 80 games, 71. I mean, it's not like he was injured a lot. You can depend on him to be in the lineup. And even last season, he had 26 points. That's not bad. I mean, to be an offensive, he had 5 goals, was in double digits for a while there. So he can maybe provide a bit of offense as well. And that's a good point with Sherrod. I mean, that could potentially maybe reignite some chemistry between the two of them. And it adds a lot to maybe Sherrod could bounce back now even more with potentially him as his partner. So yeah, it's a good deal in my mind. It's not really a lot of risk involved. I mean, he seems to be really happy to come to Detroit. So that's another bonus as well. Of course, he's coming home. So that's great. Okay, Devin, what do you think about the deal? I mean, like we said, Petry seems to be a good fit coming into Detroit.
Yeah, honestly, my first thoughts when I saw the deal was completed was, oh, we're really doing this. All right. Because it seemed like the last 2 years or so, Petry has been kind of connected to Detroit for one reason or another. As Tony said, hometown kid, his dad played for the Tigers back in the day. So there's always been that, maybe Petry should go to the Red Wings. Maybe that'll be a thing. Maybe whatever. And it's never happened. And then it happened, and it was like, all right, I guess this is happening. I don't think you can really hate the deal too much, to be honest with you. They basically traded a 4th-round pick to upgrade Gus Lindstrom.
Yeah,
that's basically what happened there. I think the only only reason you might have a gripe with this trade is that it like locks in that there's not going to be a young kid on that blue line unless like they blow the doors down, in which case they're probably going to roll with 8 defensemen to start the season, and that's a whole other thing. But that's not a bad thing, right? Simon Edvinsson, as we all know, he's still rehabbing that shoulder, or I think it was a shoulder, yep. So he's, can't really rely on him to be ready for opening night. Johansson's, the Wallanders, you just don't know. So this gives them depth right away. And then if and when injuries happen, there's not going to be an if. When injuries happen, they're all pretty old. They'll be the young guys ready to jump up and take their shot at the NHL. At the end of the day, yeah, this is a good deal, really cheap deal. I'll use a 4th round pick to upgrade a 7th defenseman anytime. And it also gives them a solid balance between lefties and righties. And it just kind of gives them options, like Tony was alluding to. You can kind of cycle your defensemen depending on how people are playing and how chemistry is looking and whatnot. It's not a bad thing to have options, and it's not a bad thing to have this depth. I'm going to echo what Tony said. This is the most blue line depth the Red Wings have had, honestly, since their rebuild began. And it's another sign that we're getting to the end of this thing.
Well, you're looking at a very veteran blue line too. I mean, it's who's the youngest? Moritz Seider. He's the youngest on the blue line, right? Lots of veteran support around him. That's going to be good for him too. I think this is I do agree. I think this is the deepest and probably the most well-rounded defense as well. It's not all offense guys. It's not all defensive guys. There's quite a few two-way defensemen in there too. So you're going to have guys going to be throwing the power play, penalty kill, all that. So I think it's going to be good. It's going to be interesting to see how all this kind of fits in and in training camp. That brings me to my off the rush question. Tony, I'll start with you. Is it Olli Maatta, the guy that's going to suffer the fate of being the guy that's going to get scratched most of the time? Or do you see him, like you said, being a guy that'll just kind of be inserted as a forward? Because he had almost a perfect season last year. What do you foresee going forward now that Petry's been acquired?
I mean, Devin mentioned it. Injuries are going to happen. So if Olli Maatta's the defenseman scratched opening night, he'll almost certainly play the next game. I don't see them like consistently sitting out any of the defensemen they have. I think they'll rotate through, given the flexibility, since Sherratt and Gostisbehere can play the right side as well. So you have 4 defensemen who can play on the right side, and then 3 who play on the left. I think Petry's played on the left side a little bit too in his career. So you have flexibility for the second and third pair. Like I really do think they're going to rotate through until they achieve some level of consistency, or there's an injury.
Yeah, which could happen quite. It will. Unfortunately, that just happens throughout the season. Devin, what do you think? Is Olli Maatta the odd man out? I mean, it seemed like they extended him. They seem to have confidence in him. So what do you foresee, Maatta?
I foresee a lot of 11 and 7. I foresee, kind of just a cycle. I don't know if that's going to be one guy who's like, sorry, you're on the outside looking in now. I think, I do think it's going to be in and out. You're going to be earning your spot. If you're going to be playing every day, you're going to earn it. There's if Jeff Petry is your 7th defenseman, if Olli Maatta is your 7th defenseman, even if Ben Sherratt's your 7th defenseman, that's pretty good. So, I don't know if any one player is going to be stapled to the press box.
It can also be Shane Gostisbehere. I mean, honestly, he's a guy that's had problems defensively in the past. It could be, I don't know. I mean, I could see him being a guy that could be scratched in favor of, depending on who you're playing. I mean, you may want an Olli Maatta in the lineup over a Gostisbehere. Who knows? But it does give Lalonde a lot of options going into every game. So, it'll be very interesting to see how I'm sure he's happy that he's got a lot of these options on defense going forward, because he was used to it in Tampa Bay. So,
really, the only defensemen that I think are going to be in the lineup every single night, unless some craziness happens or injuries or whatever, are Jake Wallman and Moritz Seider. Everything else will
Who knows?
kind of sort
Yeah.
itself out.
Justin Hull too. I mean, you don't know
Yeah.
how he goes and how he's going to fit in too. So we'll see. All right. Before we move on to our continuing our player preview and division previews, we got to pay the bills. So before we get to the next segment, here's a message from the Hockey Writers.
Interested in writing for the Hockey Writers? If you have experience writing about hockey, are passionate about the sport, and are looking to take your writing to the next level, the Hockey Writers could be the place for you. Here at THW, you will have the opportunity to hone your craft at one of the world's largest and most respected hockey publishers. You will have control over what you write, be able to seek out media credentials, and be supported by a large network of writers and editors. Plus, you'll get paid for doing it. If you're interested and want to know more about team openings and requirements, please visit the Write for THW page on the Hockey Writers website. A link to that page is also listed in the description.
All right, we're back, and we're going to talk Ville Husso for our next player preview, starting goaltender, of course, for the Red Wings going into this season. Devin, we'll start with you. What are your expectations for Husso going into 2023-24?
I'll set the bar really low. He needs to finish the season with a save percentage above 900, because he didn't do that this season, and that's not a indictment on his overall play. It's more of just like how hard he crashed and burned at the end of the year. But he has the talent to finish a lot better than what his stats said he did last season. I think overall, put numbers aside, what you want to see out of Husso this season is consistency. Like we were talking about last week and, throughout the Atlantic Division previews, Husso has shown at his best, he can steal games.
Mm-hmm.
He can, he was arguably the Red Wings MVP through the first half of the season. And then something happened and he crashed and burned, like I said. And maybe it is more than likely the workload. He first time playing over half a season in the NHL. He was definitely leaned on a lot. He knows what to expect now if that's the case this season. By all indications, it seems like the Red Wings are going to be leaning on him again this season. So he knows what to expect, and we should expect him to be better than he was last year. I'm not expecting him to be that, that like all-star elite top tier guy he was through the first couple months of the season last year. But I would like to see him be average to above average, right? Maybe give me a 0.910, 0.910 save percentage. And I'll be fine. You just want to see him make the saves he's supposed to say, make the saves he's supposed to make, and not look like a sieve out there when he's off his game. He's, like I said, he's going to be relied on a lot this season. I think he knows that. I think he knows what to expect now. So better. To really just kind of encapsulate it all in one word, just be better.
Yeah. I agree. It just has to be better, more consistent. Right. So like I said, I think last episode we were going over the goalies that we're not expecting him to be that hot goaltender that he was in the first bit of the season, because that's just unsustainable for most. But be better and more consistent. All right, over to our goaltender. Tony, what do you think about Husso? What are your expectations going into this season?
I've been thinking about this one all day. Obviously, it's a topic I really enjoy. But this was his first year as like the number one guy at the NHL level. And I mentioned this on the podcast, like it must have been a few months ago at this point, but the 3,220 minutes that he played with the Red Wings last year was 32% more than any other season he's ever played at a professional or junior level. So yeah, that's a lot. It's a lot of minutes. It's a lot more than he's ever played.
Mm-hmm.
During the exit interviews, during his media availability session, Husso mentioned that he wanted to get in even better shape for the upcoming season, just because he now knows the rigors of being the number one guy and just the consistency that's required over the long stretch, and the strain that puts on you throughout the season. So I really do think that he took that to heart. I'm sure he wants to be the number one guy. Like, the Red Wings signed James Reimer, so there's not going to be like a tandem going on here of 1A and 1B. It's Husso's still the guy, and I think he knows that, and I think he's getting prepared for that. And I guess heading into next season, I think he's going to be just in the sample of the entire season, not just the first half versus the second half. I think we're going to see a better goaltender. Still, jury is out on if he can maintain consistency, but I do think that, at the end of the day, his stats are going to look better at the end of the year. His save percentage, as Devin mentioned, is probably going to be over 900. It's going to be a better season for him now that he understands the role as number one goalie a little better.
Mm-hmm. Also, is a better defense in front of him, like we've said, with the acquisition. So that is going to help him a lot as well. And a second season with Lalonde, refining his system as well, which, always the first season is, tweaking things, finding what works. And I think we're going to see a more polished system as well under Lalonde. So overall, I think I agree. I think Husso's going to be better, not just because he wants to be better and he's more prepared, but the team is better in front of him as well. So yeah, we have some high hopes for Husso this season. So we'll see what happens when it gets going. All right, moving on, and we're going to talk Boston Bruins for our next Atlantic preview. As we all know, they won by a landslide the whole league in the regular season, at least. And at a regular season record, we all know that. A lot different this season. They got two guys gone, both retired now. David Krejci and Patrice Bergeron, both not part of the Boston Bruins for the first time in a long time. Yeah, and we know Krejci had that one season where he went back to Czechia, but for the most part, he was with the Boston Bruins, along with Bergeron. So those are two major pieces out of their lineup. And with that, let's start there and start with the centermen. Two big centermen out now, basically their first line center and their second line center. Devin, what do you think about comparing their down the middle to the Red Wings right now?
Well, for, however many years the Red Wings and the Sabres and the Senators have been rebuilding and trying to climb that Atlantic Division ladder, one team they've been looking at as who's going to provide an opening for them one day is the Boston Bruins. And it was because Krejci and Bergeron were on a ticking clock, and as soon as those guys dropped off, the roster was going to drop off. Well, here we are. That day is here. That season is here. How does their center depth look compared to the Red Wings? Not good, quite frankly. This is the first time in this Atlantic Division preview where I get to say the Red Wings have better centers. Dylan Larkin alone is better than any center they have. They've got some good guys, don't get me wrong. Charlie Coyle's pretty good in his role. Pavel Zacha has proven he can be a pretty decent center sometimes. But that's as good as it gets.
Yeah.
And Larkin literally does laps around them. And then you have, down the lineup, you got Andrew Kopp, you got JT Compher. I don't need to go down the list. Even Marco Kasper has upside to be better than some of these guys Boston has. Down the middle, again, this is the first time during this little series here, but the Red Wings win, and they win pretty clearly.
Yeah, well, I guess those two centermen are just they're massive pieces of the Bruins, not just in the past, but last season. They were really good. So big shoes to fill, whoever's going to do it. I mean, as of right now, I think Pavel Zacha is their number one center. And as much as Zacha is a good center, he is not a number one center. At least hasn't been established as one. Has had the upside from his draft year and all that, but hasn't hit it. And he was probably his best last season, and he was like their third line, I believe, third line center, or kind of rotating in and out. But yeah, it's going to be tough for the Bruins, and I think the Red Wings are definitely a better down the middle for sure. All right, Devin, we'll stay with you on the wingers to round up the forwards. What do you think? They've got some good wingers still. David Pastrnak is probably the one of the top wingers in the NHL right now. And along with the Bruins, a historic season last year. So what do you think matching up with the Red Wings?
Yeah, I would say if you're comparing players to players and positions to positions, Pasternak's probably the best winger between the two teams. So you can, if you go off of that, maybe you say Boston has better wingers. And Brad Marchand, let's not forget about him too. He's still going to be good. Even without Bergeron, I think Marchand will still be effective. I still think Pasternak will be effective. These guys are still going to find ways to score goals and create stuff for the Bruins. But they're also going to be easier to shut down because there's just not as much down the lineup. Then we go down the lineup here. Who else are wingers? Zacha could maybe be a winger. Jake DeBrusk's there. He's pretty good. They brought back Milan Lucic, which is a thing, I guess. James Van Riemsdyk, the one-time maybe Red Wing that was never a Red Wing. Shout out to him. Honestly, like there's some good winger talent here, and I think that they'll do some damage. But then, even the other teams we've been comparing to the when we talked about other teams in this series, we've talked about how the Red Wings just have a lot of depth on their wings. Yeah, Alex DeBrincat, obviously their top winger, Lucas Raymond, has all the potential in the world. But like, again, to kind of give this example here, Jonathan Berggren could very feasibly be on the fourth line, and he has the upside and skill and potential to be much higher than that in the lineup. But that's just what their depth charts it's kind of just a factor of their depth chart. And I don't know if the Bruins can match that kind of depth. Once again, I think this is maybe a case where you go the top end for the Bruins is maybe a little bit better. I think it's close because DeBrincat definitely evens that out a bit. But David Pasternak's one of the best players in the world. But then as you get down the depth chart, that's where things go towards the Detroit. And I think if you look at it as like an overall sum, I think the Red Wings have better forwards than the Bruins. And that's definitely the first time you could say that in maybe a decade, which is kind of crazy.
So as of right now, forwards wise, the Red Wings take it. So moving on to defense, this is where I think it could be a bit even for me. I mean, the Boston Bruins didn't really change on defense. They lost Orlov, he was only there after the deadline and was really good, but they couldn't afford him, so he's not there. But for the most of the season, he wasn't on the Bruins, so they were still running with their best guys: Charlie McAvoy, Brandon Carlo. Lindholm was probably one of their best defensemen for most of the season, and he was without a few guys at the beginning of the season. He probably carried that defense. So Matt Grzelcyk's not bad. It's a pretty well-rounded defense in Boston right now, and they didn't really add anything in the offseason. They did get Ian Mitchell, Kevin Shattenkirk, but those two aren't going to really move the needle. I think they're more depth guys. But compared to the Red Wings, now they got Petry. I think they're pretty much, I'd say they're even. I mean, you got Seider is probably comparable to like either McAvoy or Carlo. I mean, they're both really good defensemen, and Seider's a lot younger, obviously, but you got Wallman's probably, I don't know, probably Wallman's lesser than McAvoy or Carlo. But yeah, overall, I don't know. I think the Bruins and Red Wings defense is pretty even. They may have a little bit more experienced high-end depth, high-end at the top of the lineup, but it's first time in a while. I'm gonna say the defense is pretty even with the Red Wings. So yeah, that's gonna be interesting. All right, last line of defense, goaltending, and we'll throw it over to Tony again here for the goalies. They have the Vezina Trophy winner Linus Ullmark and his backup Jeremy Swayman, who's no slouch. He was really good last season as well. Pretty good two-headed monster there. What do you think about the goaltending compared to the Red Wings?
Well, I think this definitively is one that Boston wins. And to be honest, I think they win the defense too, especially if you look at the top four. In my opinion, McAvoy, Carlo, Hampus Lindholm, and Matt Grzelcyk probably are better than Detroit's top four, whoever that may be beyond Wallman and Seider. But that's just my opinion, at least. As for goaltending, though, Linus Ullmark and Jeremy Swayman are very good goaltenders. And one thing that kind of jumped off the page for me when I was looking into this before the show here was, you know, when you have looking at like the 2022-23 Boston Bruins, like they scored a lot and they had great defense. So, you know, kind of that makes you think about the dynasty of Red Wings, like Chris Osgood, not the best. But they had great teams. They could score a lot. They could defend well. It didn't matter. So, and you know, I was curious, like, okay, I know, you know, Ullmark had a, you know, great year statistically last year, but like, how much of that was just on the team in front of them? And one I guess statistic that I would use to measure that is high danger save percentage. If you're if you're a net and you're getting, you know, high danger shots against from like, you know, right in close, or, you know, backdoor attempts, what have you, if you're not a great goalie, you're not going to stop those no matter who's in front of you. But if you're a great goalie, you're going to find a way to stop them no matter what. And it just so happens that among goalies who played 500 minutes last year, Ullmark ranks 6th in high danger save percentage and Swayman ranked 9th. So they can handle their own back there. It's not just the team in front of them. And this is nothing against Ville Husso, but you know, you have a Vezina quality goalie in Ullmark, and then you have an up and comer in Swayman, who, you know, that is a fantastic tandem there. That's going to help them make up the difference in the scoring punch that's down a little bit, minus, you know, Bergeron, Krejci, Taylor Hall, Tyler Bertuzzi. It's not going to net out much difference with the goalies, you know, having to shoulder a little bit more load and being able to do so. So for me, clearly Boston has the edge there.
I would agree. And when you mentioned about the defense, that top four is probably better. But I think overall, though, as a unit, I think they're pretty close. But that top four is pretty good, especially with the experience and that they have for sure. Okay, our last off the rush, and this is a fun question that Tony posted on Twitter, I believe a couple days ago or yesterday. And so we'll start with you, Tony, on this one. Red Wings, and we're going to mesh two sports here together. And Moritz Seider, Lucas Raymond, as football players, what positions would they play?
Oh man, I mean, obviously, I've been thinking about this one because I had the question on Twitter. It would be awesome just to see them in one practice, just suit up with the team, blend in. It's almost like an undercover boss sort of thing, but just like throw them out there and wait till someone finds out that they're not actually on the Lions. But honestly, I think Seider would be a terror as a defensive end opposite Aiden Hutchinson. Like that would be fun to watch. And then Lucas Raymond, you know, he could be a good slot receiver, like a Danny Amendola type. Just like he's a great route runner. He can get the ball and he can speed up the field. I think that would perfectly suit him. I don't know, Devin, what do you think?
I do agree. Raymond's definitely a receiver. I don't see him as a rusher. I think he has to play offense. He's definitely not on the line. I don't think he's a quarterback, and I don't see him being a rusher either. I think he's got the hands to make a couple of great catches. As for Seider, I think you got to have him on defense.
Yeah,
I did think about an edge rusher as well, alongside Aiden Hutchinson. I think the only other thing that I thought about would be a linebacker. Either way, he's going to be looking to hit somebody because that tends to be what he does on the ice, anyways, right?
Yeah. When that question, I'm like, Lucas Raymond, receiver, like 100%. I was like, I didn't think about anything else. Definitely that. And for Seider, I actually was leaning towards linebacker myself. I think because he's just so well-rounded as a two-way defenseman, merging as a two-way guy. So I think he could be all over the field, being a linebacker. But I could see him as an end as well. But definitely on defense for sure. I don't see him as anything on offense, even though he can play offense in the NHL. But that's a fun question. So, you know, we'll open it up to the public here. Throw it in the comments. What do you think? If you haven't responded on Twitter, respond in the comments anyway, even if you have on Twitter there. So yeah, give us those comments below, and what positions would they play in football for the Detroit Lions or whatever. I mean, I'm sure they're playing for the Detroit Lions. They're not playing for any other team.
The idea of athletes from one city being able to play in any sport from that city is something that I think should happen, at least for one day. Like April and the D next year, you could switch them around. It'd be fantastic.
That'd be fun.
Whoever
All right.
whoever has the best hand-eye has to play baseball. You can just go down the list.
That's good. Yeah, that'd be fun.
Yeah, I mean, the Tigers are doing their home run celebration with slap.
Yeah, yep.
So Spencer Cork will send a stick and skates, and let's see him out there.
There you go.
Oh, that's good. All right, with that closes off another episode of the Grind Line. Thanks, Tony. Thanks, Devin, for joining in again. And yeah, we're having fun here. We're gonna keep going with this series, player previews, line previews, whatever the news that the Red Wings kind of bring out. Joe Veleno has still not signed his contract. That one is still kind of pending. We'll still wait on that one coming. But until then, make sure you're checking out thehockeywriters.com for all of our Red Wings coverage, season previews. We got whole bunch of different things going out. We got historic lists that one of our new writers have been doing last week or so. So make sure checking out all that at thehockeywriters.com. Leave us comments we'll get back to our comment corner next week. Leave those comments in below. Give us a like, subscribe to the YouTube channel if you haven't already. We also, just before we close, we also have a Substack newsletter that's going out every day as well. You can sign up that. There's a link in the description. So sign up for that newsletter. You'll get all the latest Red Wings articles for that day. It's great in your inbox every day. Just make sure you're checking that out as well. And until next time, we will see you on another episode of The Grind Line.